So we all want to understand little kids and why they do what they do, and including the things that maybe frustrate us. And my hope is that with this video, it'll help you build more perspective, empathy, and tolerance for the stages of development. Let's get into it. Hey, Becomers, welcome in. It's me, Dr. Abena Berry. So there is so much that I could say. And so I was trying to figure out what do I want to focus on for this particular video. And you all let me know in the comments what questions you have, what additional things you want me to cover, what experiences you're having with your kids that you don't understand. But I am going to just start with something a little more broad that I think really affects our perspective at time as parents, or even prospective parents, that really gets in the way of us sometimes remembering that our children are very confused and don't understand as much as we think they do. And that's a normal part of development. So I want to cover some of those things, but I want to make this a series. So please let me know in the comments what else you want to know if I do not cover it in this particular video. Also, my 5-star rated self-help book does cover this and so much more, including anxiety management, grief management, decision-making, relationships, but we'll talk more about that in detail towards the end of the video. But let's get right into it. So one of the things that I have noticed, even in my personal journey of being a parent, as well as being a psychologist and somebody who's been studying human development since I was itty bitty. I've been curious about psychology and human development since I was about 8 years old. And even with all the books that I read, the 10 years of college I had to complete, the multiple residencies, all of that, I still feel like becoming a parent allowed me to uniquely experience those things that I already had knowledge of, but in a real way, right? In the real world. And that allowed for even deeper understanding than what I already had. It made things click even further. And so one of the things that I think a lot of parents can relate to and get tripped up by is the fact that our kiddos, right? We see them within even the first year of life, we see them go from basically not being able to do anything for themselves, not being able to even hold their own neck up, speak a verbal language yet, get themselves dressed, to all of a sudden within that first, well, not all of a sudden, but, within that first year of life through our teaching, right? Because we're teaching them things. They're not just magically developing. We're their teachers as parents. So through our teaching and nurturing of their development, we see them go from being completely helpless to having, gross motor skills and fine motor skills and some language skills and all of these things. And then I would even argue that by the time they're about somewhere between 2 to maybe 5 years old, I think a lot of us would agree that sometimes it even feels like you're talking to another human being who knows as much as you do. But obviously, rationally and logically that they do not, right? Their brain is still very much so under construction. They do not know even they have a very small fraction of the knowledge that you have, but because they're mimicking a lot of your behaviors, because that's how we learn, right? Your child watched you brush your teeth, and that's part of how they learned how to brush their own, not just from you doing it, but also watching you model it. This is also why our children will, mimic all the behaviors they see of us. So if we want to raise highly empathetic individuals or individuals who have high levels of emotional intelligence, we must embody those things ourselves, because home is truly a school. And so since mimicking is a big part of learning, it can, I think, sometimes mess with our perception. And we have to be really intentional to monitor our own perception of our kids so that we don't start to have a false perception that's beyond where they are developmentally, because that can negatively contribute to how much empathy and patience that we have for them when they do something that reminds us of where they actually are developmentally. So, for instance, your kid might laugh at a joke that you're laughing at, but that doesn't mean they actually understand it in the way that you do. Young children don't actually understand sarcasm, but they will model after your laughter if you're laughing. Right? Because they're learning. They're doing things to try to learn. Or you may see them, finally learn how to put their shoes on. Or my son, for instance, he's 4 years old and he's really gotten down on getting himself dressed. And it's that's awesome to see, because it took a lot of stages of trial and error. But I also have to remind myself that even though he now knows how to dress himself, he still has to do it in a very particular way. So he doesn't understand it as deeply as I do, right? My son still has to look at the front and the back of the shirt. He still has to figure out exactly where the tag is first. He still has to put his hand up the shirt a certain way and scrunch it. He talks to himself about the steps that I taught him and that my husband taught him, right? He has to do those steps. So it's not as well learned as it is for me or my husband. Well, I don't have to think to myself, okay, lay the shirt flat like this, put my hand under it like this. I just put the shirt on without even thinking, because I've had way more practice. And so when we remember that our children are modeling behaviors that they have seen from us, or even that they are learning different tips and skills that we're teaching them so they can get better at skills. And we have to also remind ourselves that just because they can now do that thing does not mean that the learning is complete, does not mean that they have internalized it as well as we have. And it's so important to remember that, because they're going to later do something that you're like, what? How did you make this mistake or whatever? But it's because they're not nearly as far along in their development as you are. So we have to remember that just because they can now do something, it doesn't mean they have internalized it as well as we have. They're nowhere near that. And then it allows us to still have understanding about where they're at in their developmental stages, empathy for where they're at, and to not forget our role as a teacher. The problem is that our frustrations get added to when we have unrealistic expectations, when we have a tendency to forget how old they actually are and what that actually means for their developmental skills. And when we forget that what they are doing in a moment that maybe is frustrating us for whatever reason, that it actually is also revealing to us the lessons that they still need us to teach them so they can learn. Basically, if your child is, falling out on the floor, right, because they got frustrated because they couldn't get a toy in the store, it's one, that's developmentally expected and normal. Two, that's also reminding us, hey, this child needs me to keep helping them learn how to emotionally regulate. And they can't learn through abuse. They can't learn through yelling, because no one can. You can stop a behavior that way, but you don't teach a new thing or a skill that way. If I want to teach a skill, I have to break things down for them and really help them think for themselves. One of the things that we always make sure is that once we've taught enough to our son, we want him to get practice doing it on his own. We don't want him to think that his abilities only depend on our presence or only depend on our guidance. It's no, honey, you now understand this enough that I want you to try it by yourself, and we're here to help you, but only if you genuinely need help. Let them struggle a little bit. That's a part of learning. We had to fall hundreds of times before we learned how to walk, and of course be there to nurture, to guide, and to help, but also you have to release the reins a little bit. You have to eventually, stop holding the bike, right? You have to eventually take off the training wheels, but gradually, as you see their skills getting sharpened. And remember that learning happens in stages. Learning is not a 180. It's not a on-off switch. It is a gradual progression. I often use the example of, we teach a child number recognition when they're 1, 2, 3, 4 years old, which is just being able to recognize numbers, seeing a 1 and knowing it's a 1. That's number recognition. We teach that at that age because we want them to later be able to understand algebra, calculus. No number recognition when you're 3, 4 years old. No algebra or calculus when you're 16, 17, 20, whatever. So it's a building block. Everything evolves in stages. Learning evolves in stages. So even when your child has gotten better at one thing, maybe they've gotten better at regulating in one area, or maybe they're doing better at regulating at home, but when you're out in public, it's harder. But it's yeah, it's a different environment. There's different challenges. Their brain is often overstimulated. They process a lot slower than we do. That's just a scientific fact. Think of our brains at that age as it's literally under construction, not even figuratively. Literally, right? There are synapses and neural connections being built. There are all of these changes happening all the time. We often call it a light switch coming on for our son. And I'm sure if parents, or if you're really attuning to your child, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Don't you have days where you're something has changed with you? your brain is moving on a different frequency now. It's, like you can see that shift. You see how the light switch, we call it the light switch turning on, right? It's like, he's gotten something new. Like there's a new neural connection that has really been established and is now being nurtured in a different way because of our teaching and because of his persistence, right? Because our child is an active, and all children are active participants in the learning process. They want to learn, they want to grow. This is why they're so curious. This is why we ask so many questions when we're little, but they need a teacher who's willing to pour back. They're going to show up with the cup. As long as they're not being traumatized, as long as they're not being abused, they're going to show up with the cup. But it's like, am I pouring into this cup? Am I teaching or am I telling? And there's a huge difference between the two. Teaching means you are nurturing something within the person so that they can establish an understanding that can persist in your absence. Telling is just exactly what it sounds like, telling a person to answer. If I'm not teaching you how to get the answer, then you're not going to know how to do that on your own. This is how we end up with adults who don't know how to take accountability. This is why we end up with adults that struggle with critical thinking, because they were told, not taught. And so the brain needs to be fed. The feeding takes years and then even beyond your adult years, because the brain is always capable of learning. But those first 5 years of life, and especially even the first 30 years of life, what we do, what we provide in teaching makes a world of difference. Like literally, when you look at the brain of a human being who was actually nurtured during their development, taught, not told, it looks very different. It's the complexities of white matter, gray matter, because the brain was developing and what you were feeding it determined how it developed. So trauma does not allow for healthy development in the brain, especially the frontal lobe. You'll see declines in gray matter. You'll see declines in parts of the brain that need to be fed. So experiences literally feed the brain. Right? It's the building blocks, it's the bricks, it's the construction. So hopefully this helps. Like I said, leave the comments. I want to do more of this. I really want people to have higher empathy and understanding of human development, because it benefits us all. We cannot have a world in which we are humaning better together and managing our human experiences better until we recognize that learning about human development, and not just having kids because someone wanted you to have kids, but understanding that like you're signing up to be a full-time teacher, so you have to like the idea of teaching, will allow us to have more people who are really invested in the role of parenting. It'll also allow us to have more people who don't sign up for parenting unless there's something they really want, like authentically, because nothing's for everybody, right? And then it will allow for us to have children who turn into adults who can really thrive and flourish, instead of adults having to learn the basics of skills that they should have been given 20, 30, 40 years ago. Right? We shouldn't be learning the basics of emotional intelligence when we're 40. It's like, that was supposed to start at like 1 year old, 6 months old, whatever, the learning how to recognize different emotions, all of that stuff, and then built upon number recognition so we can learn calculus. So anyway, I hope this helps. Please let me know what else, like specific questions I can answer. I'm going to do more. I want to make this a playlist. So I'm going to do more of a parenting playlist and answering questions and any other questions you have. So I'm going to be making more long form content on here. So even if it's not a parent related question, you can put it in the comments as well. And I'll try to do as many videos as I can addressing the things that you all want to know about. Also subscribe and connect with me so you can become a part of my community of becomers. I would love to have you. And for those who want to learn more about my 5-star rated self-help book, which I promise you is filled. Like if you think this was helpful, my book is jam-packed with mental health knowledge, and not just the knowledge, but also I teach you, right? So I teach, not tell, how to apply what you just learned in the book. So every chapter, the first half of the chapter is teaching you about that human phenomenon. The second half of the chapter is telling you how to implement it in your life, because I don't want you to just know something. I want you to know how to do it too. You can find my book all over, everywhere, all the online, all the major places. But the best place to start is on my website because it will answer a lot of your questions. You'll be able to see the table of contents. You'll be able to see my diverse readers. Most common question I get is, do I have to be a person of color to benefit from this book? And the answer is no. It is a mental health book. My readers are white, Black, and everything in between, but it does have representation for the Black community to help fight stigma. But again, your race does not matter in the grand scheme of things, because the mental health knowledge in this book is about the human brain, and we all have the same parts to the brain. So everything in this book still applies to everyone. And the parts that are to help with representation for people of color in the Black community, it's still relevant if you're white, because this is how you increase social awareness and empathy for people who are having different lived experiences than you. But again, if you go on my website, it'll answer all those questions plus so much more. So check it out. And all the direct links to Amazon and everything else is on there. Or you can buy directly off my website, especially if you want a signed copy, because I do offer those. But you can only get those from my website or TT Shop. But yeah, that's it. For this one anyway. I look forward to hearing you all's comments and thoughts. And I'll be back soon with another video answering your questions. Thank you for watching. Bye, Becomers.